Hi, welcome to Developing Cost Control for Construction Projects. This is Lecture 3B, and I'm Tom Stephenson. We'll be today looking at this second part of cost control in Lecture 3. We'll be moving further into the work breakdown structure and what exactly it is, how it works, how it interconnects the management of your project, from organizing and ensuring you don't miss areas of work, which would have a huge impact on cost control, to making sure that you can code things and identify things under specific areas of work, like we looked at in Lecture 3A, if you recall, where we did the Dempsey Medical Building and we kind of looked at one row and having a heading of details with copper and pipe fittings, and then we looked at breaking it out by floor. Made it a lot easier for us to dig deeper into the impacts on time and cost. So we could go from a high level down to a more granular level to identify what's going on. Particularly, you'll see that in future lectures where we start looking at upgrading and measuring how we're actually doing compared to how we plan to be doing. So we'll be looking at that. We'll be also talking about cost reporting versus cost control, what's kind of the nuanced differences between those two. And we'll also be bringing in the project management tip of the week or tool of the week, which will be discussing a growth versus a fixed mindset and how that impacts projects. It's really, the theory is about how it impacts individuals, but I think it's very appropriate to think about it how it also impacts the management of projects. So, developing the cost control system, and that's what we're trying to do, is have a system so that we can actually manage our costs effectively on a project. We want to have a work breakdown structure. And we want to think of a work breakdown structure as breaking the project into areas of work that makes sense to break it into. It's really a grouping of work packages and activities at the lowest level that can be assigned to an individual resource that can be held accountable. But at the higher level, the work breakdown structure is the categories of work or the areas of work that we are scheduling to. And so what we want to do is take something that's very, very large and break it down into smaller components. As I may have mentioned in a previous lecture, you have at a high level, you can develop a work breakdown structure from the bottom up. So that's from beginning to end of a project, or from the top down. Now in construction, most cases, we're going to break down a project from the top down because most projects are somewhat larger. If it's something like a kitchen renovation, a house, and you do them all the time, you can pretty much run the activities from beginning to end. But once you get into a little bit of complexity, it's kind of hard to do that. So you want to kind of break it into groupings and areas of work to ensure you don't miss anything in the process. And it's very helpful to have sort of standardize those areas or groupings for particular types of projects, so that everybody in your company kind of has a process and flow to the work. So it's really a hierarchical structure, organizational structure, that goes from larger elements to smaller and smaller and smaller till you're at the lowest level and you have work packages which you can hold accountabilities, assign costs to directly, that you can scan at a granular level to see how you're doing based on your budget plan compared to your actual costs. So that's another strong reason why we want to use a work breakdown structure. And of course, the work packages very often in construction are contracted out. They don't have to be. It could be self-performing certain areas of the work. But very often, on a GC, general contractor type project, you might have 30, 40, 50 different subcontractors that you're dealing with. So a lot of it is contracted out. And again, if you contract it out, then you can have that labeled as a resource and a cost associated with that resource. That could be a fixed cost if it's contracted out for a lump sum, or it could be a variable cost if it's done as a cost plus type contract. All right. And so we can think of work breakdown structures in terms of different areas of construction, design, the construction methods, completion requirements, associated performance dates, because at the highest level, when you use a scheduling software, it would have a start date and a finish date. So if you had like substructure, everything below ground on a construction project may have a number of headings underneath it and could have quite a few activities underneath it. But at the top of it, you would know when that substructure work is set to start and when it's set to finish. And the groupings of activities forming a critical path at the lowest level really add up to that upper level. And when we're dealing with costs, all the costs associated with the lower activities add up to the overall cost. And so we take it from the point of view that the work breakdown structure, we want to be able to manage it. So we want to break it down into the activity levels, and we want to make sure that we can manage at the lowest levels those activities, that it's assigned to one party, and that we can roll it up as well, and we can see the measurable elements of the project. So if we're looking at a higher level, we want to see how we're progressing on a project to particular milestones and phases. We may not be so concerned about the lower level activities if we see that we're on target. But if we start to slip, then we'd want to go in and we want to look at more closely where are we slipping and what are the cost impacts to this slippage. So you could think about it level one, the highest level, that's the project. And then specific disciplines next, major phases of the work, physical elements of the work, and work packages. So it goes from general to more specific areas of work, generally speaking. So generally speaking, you can get that. This is a pretty good sort of outline of what goes on. This is giving you an example. So at a high level, the highest level, you've got the project. So this would be the project. Then you've got pre-construction, construction early work, construction, project closeout, and post-construction. So you can sort of come to grips with what would be under each particular heading. And then underneath there, you might have design and engineering, estimating, constructability, scheduling, all these particular headings that might require a whole bunch of activities underneath them before we even get to construction early work. Construction early work is before the major construction. We have certain setups, maybe demolition of an existing building, earthworks and leveling and that sort of thing going on before we actually mobilize on the site. So you can sort of see how the categories of work could fall. Now, you know what? If for some reason that didn't make sense to have this, then you wouldn't have any activities on that particular project relating to that. You're pretty much always going to have pre-construction, construction, project closeout, but there's times where that may not make sense. Also, you can sort of see under construction, site mobilization, excavation, substructure. These are where you could more or less standardize a lot of the headings within a company. And it depends on the types of projects. You could standardize the headings depending on, if it's a hospital project, it's a condominium project, etc. But they're giving you sort of areas now that you would break down into, well, what are all the things that we need to do under each particular area? And so it's also being very helpful to ensure that you don't miss whole areas of work or have gaps of work in developing your schedules and your costs. Now, if you go looking further, you could even look under something like pre-construction. As I said, all of these particular headings could include a number of activities underneath each heading. Even substructure might have its own series of headings, right? Because maybe it's an office building and maybe it's got 3 levels of underground parking. And then you've got a basement on top of that. And then you've got the ground floor. So you could have something laying out like that. And then you could have the overall superstructure. And maybe you've left the ground floor under substructure because it's a little bit unusual. So you decided to keep it under that heading. And then superstructure is where you get a lot of repetitions. Condominium building, maybe you got 30 floors. So there's a lot of repetition that would be going into it. So you break that into headings. Building envelope. You would have masonry. Maybe you've got to decide, well, what's the shell of the building? Is it masonry or is it precast concrete, etc.? Well, it's not going to be all of them. It may be 1 or 2 of them, but it's not going to be all of them. But if it's not any of some of them, you just don't use those ones. So again, it's almost like the master format and specifications. If there's a section that's not applicable, you just don't include it. interior partitions, building systems, and again, this could break down much further than what I'm showing here, but it's just giving you an idea of how from one level to the next level it breaks down. And obviously, if I've got headings, it's going to help me to ensure that I don't miss any particular areas of work that way. And of course, then we have project closeout, and then you'd have all the items that you'd want to have as headings, and then you could have activities below that. And I'm talking about larger projects here that this may be laid out for. Obviously, if we're doing a house, it's not going to be involved having so many headings in the work breakdown structure. It just depends on the type of building and structure that you're doing. But if you do large, complex projects, it would make a lot of sense to have that. If you do smaller, mid-sized projects, it would make a lot of sense to set up your templates for what's a typical type of project. So I'm talking about a condominium building or a hospital at a high level. You could be talking about a bathroom or a kitchen. You could have a template where you'd have standard headings, and then you could even have standard activities, because those don't change that drastically. And that could be your template, your starting template, and then you could fill out all the unique information for a particular project, which would make it much, much quicker to do. And it would also act as a checklist, and the checklist ensures that you don't miss particular items of work that way. So kind of giving you that idea. Here's sort of an example that I've got here, which is a building, and we can kind of think of this example here, how it flows down from the high level of a building to pre-construction, to job site mobilization, construction phases, then we've got substructure in this example, excavations, footings, foundation walls, slab on grade east side. Now you should look at the work breakdown structure, how it's sort of indented under different levels, and the levels correspond with the WBS numbering system. So you have a numbering system that you can follow through the WBS, and you can customize this in most software programs. And so then it's following down through that numbering system, and then everything under 1.3 would be 1.3 something. So this is like 1.31, and this is be 1.32. So you can see the various levels, and as it goes in, 1.311, 1.212, 1.313. Actually, that one I think should be saying 1.312. If I'm not mistaken. But anyway, so you can see how it's flowing through step by step by step by step. I must have done something there at some point. That's why I changed that. So that's giving you an overall heading views. And so this is showing slab on grade east side. It must be a big slab on grade. So you decided on this project, you're going to break it up into two sections. Slab on grade east side, slab on grade west side. And so when you open up the plus sign, there would be a bunch of activities under here. Now at this stage, you could assign individual costs to the individual activities, and they would sum up over here. So at differing levels, you could monitor the work. You could see how are we doing overall on the project when you've updated it compared to your baseline. But you could also, if you were over budget, you could dig down and see where exactly are we over budget, and that might send you to slab on grade east side. You might see, oh, we're quite drastically over budget here, and then you could dig further to see which activities in particular are over budget. So that gives you really good information so that you could work on that and you could try to recover that information. So characteristics of a work package, right? Represents units of work at the level where the work is performed. So we're talking down in here, right? When we're talking about work package. So characteristics of that. Clearly distinguish one from the others. Contains a clearly defined start and end dates that are representative. Specifics of a budget in terms of dollars and person hours or other measurable units that you may see on the budget. And limits the work to be performed to relatively short periods of time to minimize the work in progress. You don't want to have this too long a period. You want to be able to measure it. Like I don't want to have underground mechanical piping 75 days because I can't really measure it. And if you remember what we talked about earlier in the course, SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound, commitment to doing the work. Well, the time-bound part and the measurable part comes in here. So we've got basically a duration. It would also have a start and finish date. And if it's too big, it's too hard to measure. Like at this level, I can't really measure unless I've been updating things at the lower level. Then I can measure. Then I know. I know if something's supposed to take 6 days when I'm about 3 days in. Am I about halfway done? That gives me a good caliber to measure with. If it's 460 days, when I'm at day 260 or 230 on the project, am I halfway done? It's harder to tell. So that example that I was just doing, we can sort of just run through it here, which was that project at the highest level, specific disciplines of the whole project. And so remember, pre-construction, construction, early work, construction phases, project closeout, post-construction. That would be the next level. And then we went through substructure, superstructure. So these are all under construction phases. Each one of these has a series of headings under it. But if I look at C, construction phases, then under that heading, I have these headings as an example. And then if I'm going further down, all right, so I've got substructure, superstructure. If I look at substructure, number A, then under substructure, I've got all these headings. This is everything at grade or below grade. And then if I'm looking at that, the slab on grade is slab on grade east side, slab on grade west side. All right, so basically I've got under this, I've broken that down into 2 sections. So there I'm getting down to the specific areas of work where I'm going to have the activities at the lowest level. So I can basically monitor that, and I can check my costing, how I'm actually doing on the specific projects. So I can, at each level too, the amounts of money sum up. So I can see how I'm doing in the substructure area, how am I progressing, and I can go very granular down to lower levels to get a good picture of how we're doing overall on the project. So here's another example of what I was just talking about. This time it's in Microsoft Project, showing you all the various headings here. I think this time I've got the number correct over here. All right, so you can see how they all flow in together. And you would have other connections to other areas of work, but right now, because they're rolled up, you don't see that. But altogether, it would form a critical path on the project. And the nice thing is I can check an area of work that I'm working on while keeping the other headings closed if I wanted to just keep it more compressed in the actual software program. So this is using MS Project. There's 2 softwares in construction project that sort of dominate scheduling. There's a lot of other ones, so I'm not necessarily partial to any one. They kind of work the same way. But MS Project and the other one's Primavera, P6. There's not, like, in how it looks, it doesn't look that much different. I could have made this colorful too in Microsoft Project. So, but you do have that work breakdown structure, and that's kind of the way that everything flows. Same project, just a different software program, just showing how the interconnections are made on that. So work breakdown structure can be done in a multitude of ways, and that's how you do it. And that's how you sort of structure your project to start out with. You can, when we're talking about the cost breakdowns for a project may be broken down. And if we think about a business has several financial statements. It has an income statement, it has a balance sheet, has a cash flow statement. There's usually a bunch of ratios that are used to check to see the health of the business, how it's progressing. And so we can actually, an income statement is taken over a period of time. It can be taken monthly, it can be taken quarterly, it can be taken yearly. Public companies, they'll be done very frequently because they have specific reporting requirements. So large construction companies that are publicly traded, you can see their income statements. They're posted. Private ones you won't see. But essentially, all of the projects that you have and the income that's flowing into those projects and the money that's flowing out from the company to pay suppliers, subcontractors, and everybody else is categorized, and it's summed up in the income statement. So at the end of the year, you're going to see basically how much money your company brought in, how much money went out, and then you've got all your overhead monies, your admin staff, your office, and those kind of things. And at the end, after you paid your taxes, you've got your profit before tax, and then you got profit after tax. That's what's left. But individually, each project has its own kind of income statement because you've priced this project, you've estimated this project, and in the estimate, you would have included all the direct costs for this project. You would have allocated a certain amount for your overhead, assuming that you're going to make a certain amount of sales in that year. That amount going for overhead goes to pay for all these other expenses, like estimating projects that you never get. There's a lot of projects you never get. Think of the estimating team that has to price those projects and the pursuit of those projects, and you don't get them. Well, somebody has to pay for them. It's the other projects that pays for them. So you have to be able to cover your overhead and for the enough sales to cover the overhead for the year, and then have a target amount on top of that for profit. What is that amount that you're trying to achieve? We did also mention in an earlier lecture, you better have a bit of a management reserve for the unknown unknowns that may happen on your projects too, so that there's a little bit of a contingency allocated there. So job cost ledger, you've got your jobs, the phases of works, cost code, cost types. So if we think about that point of view from a job perspective, there's your job number. The job cost ledger is like taking all of the jobs, which eventually, as I said, all of that information goes into your income statement to show how did we do on the year. Well, then we've got this job. It's got a specific job number allocated to it. And we might have different phases on the work. That's a possibility too. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, tower 1, tower 2, etc. And then you have some cost codes that will be assigned to the various areas of work. And then, as we mentioned last week, there's different things that we want to monitor. There's materials, there's labor, there's equipment, right? There's admin costs. There's various areas that we want to monitor compared to our plan, our budget, to our actuals, and see how this is rolling out so we can see how we are doing and if we're meeting our overall target. Was this a good project for us to have gotten? So you're trying to determine those aspects. Now, the coding can be broken up, and again, I don't want to get lost in the coding in this course, but the coding can be broken up into different areas. So this is just giving you an example. It's not saying this is the way. It's just saying, you got to have a job number. Maybe if there's a phase number, cost code, cost type, what this might look like in different structures or settings, almost like a phone number type situation. Your project number. Are you working in a certain geographical area? So maybe you're a company and you have you work in 5 states or 5 provinces in different countries, Canada or United States, and you would have an area code for that district because then that's going to roll up into your overall projects and your overall income statement for the business, right? And so it's a matter of having a hierarchy that you can roll up and you can roll down. You can get very granular with the work type and the distribution code. So like I said, it could be the 8th project in 2015 and a bridge. So maybe something that signifies the year, something that signifies basically the number of project, and a letter or some sort of abbreviation that would signify the different project types, because maybe you're an infrastructure company. So it could be something structured like that. Geographic location, as I mentioned. It could be then, we said master format, so it could be based, if you've got your cost coding on master format, then it's just following through the different levels of what are we actually looking at in this particular example here for the coding of the work that's being done. And then maybe there's a distribution. Are we, if it was number one over here, maybe it's referring to the total of the work in that area. Maybe number two would be material, number three, labor, equipment, number five, subcontracts. So different ways that then we could identify what area or who is involved in this particular area. So it's just showing you how different codes could be used in different ways to structure and monitor how that work is flowing and how that work is going. So work breakdown structure, some sort of system of coding that, again, that'll tie back to the accounting programs that the company is utilizing. And then that information will filter into the financial statements for the business at a higher level. But it can all be gone from high to low, from low to high through the system. So there has to be a way that you can filter the information and review it. Now, of course, we're probably much more on site, as this course is geared towards the PM role or the site role on this. We're much more geared to the activities and the connection to time and cost and scheduling and the actual work that's being executed on site, but getting timely feedback so that we know how the project is proceeding is very important. And so that's where you kind of think about cost reporting versus active cost control. And I almost was tempted to put active agile cost control. And I think I'll talk about agile in another lecture, so I thought I'd save it. But cost reporting, if we think about that, it's usually reflective in nature. If we think about cost reporting, meaning it's done, it's over this section. It's not really timely enough for us to be able to take corrective actions to the problems in this phase or work or project. So it's kind of reactive in nature. It's not that it's not important. Obviously, we need cost reporting so it can filter into our accounting programs, and that, like I said, we've got to know as a business how we're doing. We might have quarterly reports if we're a publicly traded company, so we've got to gather all that information. If you're a publicly traded company, there's reporting requirements to ensure that the buying public who may be purchasing your shares knows how this business is doing. So the reporting requirements that come into that is being fed from what's happening on the project. So it's really to establish, is this business worth this particular stock price? Do we see a lot of strength in it that might drive the price up? If it sees weakness, like there's losses overall in the accumulation of the various projects, that may drive a stock price down, as an example. Cost control, on the other hand, we're really trying to get timely information to the site team so they can review it, so they can analyze it, and they can take action on it. So it's being more proactive. Now, obviously, any kind of updates is stuff that is done. So I'm not saying that it's into the future at this point. But what it does do, give you, as you get that information, it does give you the ability to be able to forecast into the future if you don't, as we mentioned in lecture 3A. And it also allows you to look at it and say, all right, so we are not doing well on this. Our productivity rates are below what we expected. What can we do now to get that productivity rate down, or even better than what we planned, so we can get that cost or that expense that we've now incurred back? And so that's being very proactive, and it's setting a certain tone with the project team of how this business operates. It also helps to set the culture of the business, that we're not a defeatist culture, we're an active culture in the management of projects. So that's why, as I said, I'll talk about agile and lean in other lectures, but definitely active cost control is a key word. It's not sort of something that is static. It's a dynamic term. So it's a way that we got to think about things, which made me think, because as I said, I'm trying to have a project management tool of the week for us in this course. And let's see, for week 1, we looked at VUCA. We kind of looked at the Pomodoro timer for effective focus and management of time. We did look at VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and how that can impact us, but how we can use it to our advantage in planning our projects. and have contingencies. We talked about a contingency reserve and a management reserve. Management reserve for the unknown unknowns, contingency reserve at the project team level for known unknowns, and so that we can deal with those things as they come up. And as I was going through this, I thought this is a pretty good topic for the project management tool of the week this week. And so continuous improvement and a growth versus fixed mindset. Well, continuous improvement ties back to what I just talked about in the previous slide, having timely information, being able to act on the data, being able to be active, right? So I thought that makes perfect sense in here. And of course, continuous improvement ties to lean construction, which is adding value, reducing waste. It's also into having a continuous flow in the project, which we'll get into. So growth versus fixed mindset, well, made me think of the work that Carol Dweck has done on this, and she's written a book called Mindset, a very well-known book in organizational behavior and the psychology side of things. And when we think about that, what she really defined as a growth and fixed mindset is that a fixed mindset is somebody that sort of looks at things like they can't necessarily grow with it. They've got a certain talent. They think of themselves as talent. They may have been told by their parents, they may have grown up as being told they're talented. Oh, you're so talented at this. You're so talented at mathematics. You don't need to study. You're so talented at this. Wow. Problem with that is she found in her research, and she's done a lot of research on this, so this isn't just sort of coming out of somebody's thoughts. And her research showed that people with a fixed mindset, they've been told that they're talented at something, and that works well up to a point where they hit kind of where it gets tough. And it gets tough for everybody at a certain point. If you're going to be really master something, it means you've got to get to a very, very high level. So if somebody's been telling you you're great at math, well, at a certain point, the math gets hard for you. And if you think that you're supposed to have this natural talent, you know what? You kind of think, oh, I don't want to fail at this. People are going to talk about me, that I'm supposed to be this talent in this. And so you avoid it. You switch. You don't go further in mathematics because you feel that that's going to show you as a failure. On the other hand, somebody with a growth mindset might not have the same talent. They might have the same talent, but they might not. Yet they've been always told that, you got an A on this. Oh, you worked so hard for this. You deserve this A. I saw how much you were studying for it. Kudos to you that you worked so hard on it. I know it wasn't easy. They start to think, well, if I work at this, I can get better at this. I've had tough times before, and they start to build certain habits and routines, rituals, and we did talk about how systems fit into companies' thinkings, goals, and systems. Well, they start to build systems of how they can study effectively, how they can do things effectively, how when they hit a roadblock, all right, so I got this roadblock in my way. It's this wall's blocking my way of getting through it. Well, maybe somebody with a fixed mindset would say, well, the wall's in the way, I guess, and can't cross it. Somebody with a growth mindset is like, I'm going to go under the wall. I'm going to try going around the wall. I'm going to try going over the wall. I'm going to get a jackhammer and go through the wall. They're figuring out a way to get around it and get through it and get over it. So a growth mindset person is willing to try new things. And I see it all the time because I've taught for many years. I'll have students that will say, I'm no good with computers. And you know what? They're right. They're no good with computers. I'm no good at math. You know what? They're right. They're no good at math. Much better to say, I'm not good with computers yet. So Dweck would say, I'm not good with computers yet. I'm not good at mathematics yet. I'm not good at playing the piano yet. And that's giving you the opportunity in your mind to frame it that you can get better at this as you go along. And so when I think about this, and I think about businesses operating too, if I'm going to create a culture, like what does this have to do with cost control and construction? Well, we're going to hit roadblocks. As I said, we're going to have things that don't work towards the plan. We are not going as planned with the time frame. We are actually over budget by X amount of dollars. Now you can just sort of throw up our hands and say, well, this project's a loss. Or you can start analyzing and look at, we're over budget up till now. But doesn't mean we have to be over budget by the end of the project. Doesn't mean we have to run this project late. So we're not over budget for the project yet. We're not late yet, right? And that's changing the mindset of how you're managing the project. And don't think that that doesn't have an impact on everybody around your project team. If you're leading that project team, you got to make sure that you're setting the tone in the right way. If we've got a good project management system that's managing our schedule, managing our costs, managing our quality, we can see where we are at certain points, we can evaluate it, and then we can take action. That's operating a project and a project team with a growth mindset. So that would be my project management tool of the week, and how we can apply it into a cost control system and how we can think about it. So very, very helpful. Dweck's book is really good on that topic. You can find also lots of background information on various YouTube videos, and there's been lots written on her book over the years. So it's definitely a good way of thinking about things in your personal life, in a continuous improvement, and in a business context, in cost control for our particular course. Okay, so that's what I wanted to cover for this week, and hopefully that's starting to resonate with you. It's a lot of moving parts that will start to come together as we move through this course. So I'm Tom Stephenson, wishing you a wonderful day, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.